Hello again, and welcome to the Stafford Connect podcast. I'm Tom Cohen. On this episode, we're going to consider a topic that has very much been in the news: the effort to reduce the size of the federal government. Importantly, this impacts the residents of our community and their families. Since the 1968 presidential campaign, every campaign and administration has focused the attention on reducing, reforming, reimagining, or some other word, the federal bureaucracy. The efforts by the Trump administration's Department of Government Efficiency, also known as DOGE, are the most recent of these efforts. Oxford Economics predicts that Washington could lose 2.5% of the jobs if the Trump administration cuts 200,000 federal employees in 2025. One question is, what happens to those who have lost their jobs? Based on past federal layoffs, 35% would go to the private sector. 15% would join state or local governments. 10% would retire, and 5% would become self-employed. But that leaves us 35%, and they just become unemployed. Earlier this year, the administration offered some employees what has been called a buyout option. Of course, it's easy to talk about all of this in the abstract without really considering the human cost of it all. But our guest is on this episode is not just an abstraction. Tamara Olsen-Harper is now a former employee of the federal government who lives right here in our community. Until recently, she worked in the Small Business Administration. But like so many federal employees in our community, she was caught up in the DOGE initiative and decided to leave the job and move on. She's with us on this program to talk about that decision and help us understand what it has meant to her and to her family. Hello, Tamara, and welcome to Stafford Connect.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, and we always like to sort of get to know the guest first. So what would you like Stafford County to know about you?
So I've been a local. I was born in D.C., started life in Northern Virginia, and then kind of continued to move south where things were, my parents were more affordable. And then I was in Fauquier County. Then I moved back to Manassas, finished out, I guess, my younger years here and decided that it was time to step out and do something a little more. So my options were, didn't have a whole lot of money for college, really wasn't interested in going to school right away. I think I'd had enough. And then I worked for United Airlines for a little while, which was fun, but not the best paying job. And I just remember going home one day, it was raining. I said, I gotta do something else. I gotta do something more. So, but I've waited tables. I was an administrative assistant, and then I said, you know what? I'm going to go talk to somebody. And my dad was Marine. He said, you are not going to the Marine Corps. And I was like, but that's what we know. So had an older brother, was Air Force, and went to talk to the Air Force recruiter, took the ASVAB, did well, made a choice. And the rest was I moved on to join the Air Force, travel, ultimately came back to my family here. When you have kids, it's better to have your community. So came back and finished out my degrees. I went to school double full time at local schools, had my boys, and my husband at the time started working in DC. I worked locally, and then started, after I finished my master's, got into the working world, and then years have progressed, and here we are.
Awesome. And so you've been working for the federal government. Can you give us some idea what agency and how long and all that fun stuff?
Yeah. So actually, when I first, I did some nonprofit work with the local, it's changed names so many times, but we were it was the Wounded Warrior Program with the Virginia Department of Health and Veterans Affairs, and we operated out of the local RACSB, doing peer counseling with families. I was very passionate about at the time, PTSD, TBIs, and there is a service member part, but then there's an entire family dynamic that goes with that. And then I was offered an opportunity to work with a local DOD contractor doing work with military spouses and their career goals, because they move around so much, they work so hard, they're raising families. Sometimes they're doing a lot of things alone with deployments, and there were opportunities for education and building their own tenure. And that's when remote work really started to pick up. So it was incredible to be a part of building connections and partnerships with Fortune 500 companies, small businesses that recognize the importance of military spouses in the community and the working world. So I started there, I moved up, and then I moved back into my love of core HR, and did some work with the Navy, CNIC, Commander Navy Installation Command, doing recruiting, bringing on the right talent. And then I was picked up by a small business, PTG International out of Maryland. The first time I worked for a small business, and such an incredible experience as a senior human capital consultant and project manager. And we worked directly with the Small Business Administration. That contract ended up going away, but the Deputy Chief Information Officer at the time said, "Would you be interested in joining us as a GS?" And actually called me and said, "Why did you leave government service?" And I was like, the military? I got out. He goes, no, a GS. I said, I wasn't a GS. I haven't done that. He said, "Would you consider it? We would really like to bring someone with your expertise on full time, and not as a contract, because contractors, you come and go and the time can end." He goes, "But we really want to find a way to secure your talent here." So it was an incredible opportunity. I joined them, and that's how I moved into the GS world as a permanent fixture at the Small Business Administration, working in the Office of the Chief Information Officer.
And so if everybody understands what the Small Business Administration does in general, what's a good way to figure out, besides, I mean, one thing is to say it helps small businesses, but I
Sure.
think there's a lot more that they do.
There is. So there are, and I don't want to say the number of program offices that are there, because I can't remember. It's between 20 and 30, but they all have small, I think of the B movie, we all have these small jobs, but all doing together, we contribute to this amazing and large mission. And there were IT specialists is actually the main positions that I worked with, but you can have, they're called parentheticals. There's something called the NICE framework, which is through, it's done through NIST, and it's the Department of Commerce is really what it falls under. But there was a federal cyber workforce working group that I was a part of, and the number of cybersecurity positions that are open, not just in America, but across the globe. I really focused on the workforce development and how do we not only find and bring in the right talent, but how do we retain them? So I worked on building a framework to strengthen the tech talent. But in the middle of all of that, I started there in 2021. So, we were going through the COVID situation, and we had to figure out how to continue operations, hurry up and move everybody home. And how do we started using the MS Teams piece, and, it's a change and it's adaptability. And that's what, at the core of my work, what I do is people and culture, and understanding that change is change. It's not easy. Some people are more adaptable than others. But at the end of the day, we were the backbone of the systems that, if you heard about the PPP loans, it doesn't, a lot of people hear about some of the negative things, but in that time, we had partner offices and IT specialists, not just in the Office of the Chief Information Officer. They are spread throughout SBA. SBA's mission is to help businesses build, be resilient, and at times during disaster recover. So we're not just in an office in DC. there are multiple field offices, and when there's a disaster, our disaster teams go out and make sure that, they have the resources to rebuild and to help continue their businesses. There's over 34 million small businesses in America. So to keep that going is such an incredible mission, and you have to have a passion for the mission. And IT is a huge part of that world. So modernizing it and keeping people connected was truly the core of the mission that we did.
And that's fascinating. I know from during COVID and then in interacting with different entities that have helped with different natural disasters, that's one of the things that people will hear about the FEMA aspect. But there's this underlying SBA element that goes in and to help people. During COVID, it was massive in helping in Stafford to try to keep small businesses alive.
Yeah.
And then in a really normal disaster, if that could be said, they're out there to help people get back on their feet and get their businesses up and running, because that's what helps the community. So
Right.
it's really a diverse entity that deals with this. So is there a difference between working for the federal government versus working in the private sector?
Oh, absolutely. One of the things, and and I thought about the questions that you shared with me, and I think that you said, what was one of the big differences, and I tried to focus on what's the thing that drove the difference. And when I got there, I was like, oh, it's the trust factor. When and I had a very, very different experience, not bad, but just different. When I was a DOD contractor, there's a lot of structure, and it's a stringent, structure. And I was structure. I'm prior military, so I enjoyed that. Maybe I didn't know at the time, but I think I said, and I've said this to my mentors who at SBA have been incredible, and there are a few that stand out. It's such a large. It's one of the smaller agencies, but there's so many people and things that go on. When you're in a contracting role, there's so many layers to go through, and you don't truly know what's going on the inside. And you walk away wondering, are they okay with what we did? We have these deliverables. You have these metrics you have to meet. DOD was much more stringent. We were on the go constantly. We worked these crazy hours, but it was incredibly rewarding to me, especially the military spouse piece. And then when I moved over and worked with SBA, it was very different as a contractor, because I was having direct conversations with the CIO, the chief information officer, the deputy chief information officer. I got to build a relationship with their human capital office, but there was still this kind of little standoffish of, I'm a contractor. I'm not in. So when I got in, and I was very respected by the CIO team when I was a contractor, and they expressed that, and it was a great experience. But once I became a GS, my role there was I'm trying to remember. It was a very long title, and then you kind of you break it down to. I was the cyber workforce development branch chief, and I had a small team, and we brought recruiting, communications. If you've ever heard of the FEVS, the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey, that kind of pushing that entity, and then that mission fell under us. But the relationships I was able to build, it was like I was one of them. Now I was responsible for the success of certain things, and then working with the contractors, So it was really more of, if I could compare it to, it was family, basically. And then if I didn't know it before, I knew during this administration change, the people that came together, the people that were there for you, and not just for what was on paper and what you had to produce, but, the uncertainties that we faced together. And we did it even before that happened, it's like, we have to produce this. But I will say, and I had a very good friend who we would laugh and say, those that came from the contract world, things operate a little bit slower on the GS side. I'm sure people have heard, the red tape. Contractors, you are working to earn your next option year. And we would say, the kids say, oh, you haven't done this, and it shows. But it's some people have never had to work to, they don't understand what it's like to have to work to earn their next option year, and it shows. But things did take longer on the GS side. But I was a pusher, and I enabled the team, and culture was so important to me, and people needed to understand how important their roles were. So I was an advisor, and I gave people the opportunity to have open conversations with, hey, we close the door. I'm Tamara, you're so-and-so. I'm not the workforce chief, and you're the whatever. Let's have this open conversation so we can get to the core of, why is this taking so long? Why is a modernization effort not catching on? Like, what do we need to do? Who do we need to partner with? So really building coalitions was, I don't know if I would say easier, but the roadmap was more supported to build that. And I didn't have to, the guesswork of being a contractor was taken away. So those relationships were built much easier, and we were able to create a path together.
And it's sort of, and it seems to be true in all walks of life, that when, like you did, you were at one level and now you're at a different level, but you interact with the people that and the jobs that you had before, you have more of an understanding of what their needs, what their challenges are, and it makes a far better relationship in getting things done. And that cuts across. It's in education, it's in everything. That having that knowledge tends to be helpful in getting things to actually make an organization works more smoothly.
It does. In fact, I remember when I first joined SBA as a GS, my role had not existed previously, and I credit the deputy CIO at the time, who said, we need this, we need this permanently. And there's a breakdown sometimes between your program offices. That's at SBA, we were program offices, and other agencies, they could be called something else. We have departments, we have bureaus, we have program offices in SBA. And it was truly, it was building the relationships with the knowledge. And for us, and bringing me in, it was working with the human capital team, who worked so hard. But you bumped heads a lot, because you understand what you need in this person or this position. You need the talent, and you struggle with one of the things you'll always hear if you work with, especially federal government, is we're never going to be able to compete with the salaries in industry. So you have to find the total compensation and the buy-in. And there were some people who could really help explain the talking points, and at the time, it was the security and the opportunity you got to work on these different projects. But you're right, it was now, as hard as the days were sometimes when I was a contractor, and I thought, gosh, if I could just be in the conversation and I could just I could just know what they're thinking. I was helping create the right transparency and build the relationships between the GS side and the contractors. And we created a very inclusive environment so that we could have those conversations, because, well, why did we bring this contract in? And it was to help us achieve things. So you're right. And I go back to the mindset of, for me, in the Air Force, some of the best officers I ever worked with were enlisted, and then they became officers because now they understood both sides, so they could speak to all of it. And it's so well-rounded, and kind of, I relate that to, not that you're any less than as a government service worker, but having that experience as a contractor. And there was this amazing leader at the National Science Foundation who I was a little nervous because coming in, I was still thinking rank, and she was incredible, and she helped me through just thinking through some of the things that the differences. And she was a contractor. I think she didn't join the government service until she was 40, and she was the CIO, and sometimes you have a lot of split roles. And I think at the time she was also the chief data officer as well. But just such an incredible person, and the way she could explain things to me. And we would laugh. She goes, I just wonder if is it something like, should everybody have to be a contractor and then move on to the, it's just you have such a different perspective. And it's an amazing perspective. And I was glad to bring it to the GS workforce. But again, I was so grateful to have the trust of the GS team that I worked with, and building the coalitions, which it wasn't always easy. There was still some of those, what does she want? What is her purpose? But we got through those things. So yeah, I think being able to explain even the contractor mindset, and sometimes you don't get to keep the contractors. The budget may not allow for it. So having the hard conversations too, but finding the way to keep the great things that they brought you and helped you build. It's a well-rounded opportunity, but there's hard days too.
Oh, so. Wow. Well, and that's true. So, so what happened to your position with the government that sort of changed your status, and maybe how were you informed about it?
So this is the touchy part, and I'll start with let's see. So the administration changes in January, and if anybody, I'm sure a lot of people saw and they heard the flurry of executive orders, and it was just so quick. And when you're in the position as a federal government employee, your job, your mission is to serve the agenda of the president's agenda, the president's management agenda, those goals, those strategic goals. And whatever your feelings are, you have to be nonpartisan in those goals. So we had our mission, and that mission is, at the end of the day, to whatever it is that you're doing, you are serving the American people, your fellow Americans, the taxpayers. I'm a taxpayer, you're a taxpayer, they're all taxpayers, so we're all benefiting. My role at the time when I came in, I was like I said, the cyber workforce development branch chief, and then I was promoted into within my we had branches, and then you have oh my gosh, the hierarchy is escaping me right now, but you have your director, and then you have your branch chiefs. But I became a division director, and when my supervisor left to move on to another agency, who was an incredibly kind and compassionate person, so those shoes to fill were, and I have a different leadership style, but still very much care for the people and how we complete our mission. I became the director of the resource management office for the CIO, and I continued to, so much of what I did was advising and listening to the people and furthering the missions, and finding that the staffing was our biggest goal. And you have vacancies, and sometimes they're very hard to fill because for a multitude of reasons. You have to understand exactly what it is you need. You have to you work to the mission. You work to the emergent technologies, what is it that you need? And so many times you would say that to that was our job, was to work with the other directors and supervisors. Okay, you have turnover. So if you want to fill this role, are we using the same position description, or what are the changes to meet the emerging technologies? And that was a difficult answer sometimes, and especially as busy and understaffed as we were. What changes are coming? So my job and my team's job was to ask the right questions, to study what was coming down, and to advise them. And when my role as the resource management director came up, I don't know all the reasons. I was in some meetings that I walked away from some of those meetings frustrated that I couldn't express to some of the new people, DOGE. I was in meetings with DOGE representatives, and some of my even leadership was in there, and they would come to me and try to, we would have conversations about what was going to happen. And truly, as anyone who's paid attention, is the goal is to reduce the federal government workforce. It was hard to do it in such a way that, you had to communicate with people how this was the right thing. And I'm not saying it was the wrong thing, because there was, anytime we're in, there have been incredible leaders who have, in Congress stated, and I've watched so many of the hearings, and we all want to weed out fraud, waste, and abuse. No, we don't want to pay our tax dollars to fraud, waste, and abuse. Everybody wants that. But the way that you do it, you have to make sure that you're doing it in a smart and long-term, the right way. So some of it I don't know. I don't know what decision ultimately was made on some of the permanent positions that were SES, Senior Executive Service, were flipped over into political appointees. So some people were moved around and political appointees were brought in, and some incredibly smart people who came from private sector who, were there to help further the president's agenda, which is fine. You should, the people voted, and that's what you're supposed to do. So learning the way of government, though, it takes time. If you've not been in that sector, in that role, it does take time to understand the right way to do it. And they wanted things so quickly. If you've watched the DOGE wall, and we watched it a lot, and how the numbers would change, and you listen to the media, and even now, as I've stepped away and I've tried to change my algorithms, and it is hard because it's still everywhere, and I still have friends and colleagues that are in it. But when they made the decision to cut out certain roles, I was not in those conversations with our human capital leadership. They had some changes again in the SES roles. Our chief human capital officer and the deputy, who were incredibly compassionate and cared so much about the mission and the people, and made so many positive changes in their time. One had moved on, the Chico, who we call the chief human capital officer, had moved into a different role. There were some changes. Again, people who maybe weren't fully familiar with how the structure of government worked, and maybe where some of the talent could have been moved or could have been better utilized, and worked together. The collaborative piece wasn't solidified. It wasn't a smooth transition at all, and that happens in a lot of administration changes. My boy's dad, who, I hate saying the word ex-husband because we are still incredible friends, has been in the government for much longer than I have, and he I've known about several administration changes, but this was the first one I was involved in the inside as a GS. I was a contractor and saw some things, but um, it was hard, and you try not to take it personal and that's what I had to tell several people is it's not personal, it's business. But when you can't explain to someone the reason, and Simon Sinek, who's, an incredible speaker, and he has books and he has his TED Talks, says, start with the why. And when you can't explain the why, it's hard for people to walk away with that closure. So the Resource Management Office, I oversaw the workforce pieces. I oversaw the finance and our financial specialists in the budget. So a budget for OCIO and the acquisitions, the contracts, which were all pieces that the administration was very interested in moving around. And, we had a glimpse of what the Trump administration the first time around was. They tried to accomplish some things, and there were some great ideas in this. And when they came out with I might be jumping around, so I'm sorry, and I'll try to clean it up for you, but this fork in the road email that came out. I don't know if you're familiar with that or people heard it's, and it was a mirror of what happened at formerly Twitter, now X. It was this fork in the road, and how they were offering this. It was not a buyout. People call it a buyout, and I understand not knowing all the the intricacies of how the government system works. It was basically offering you the opportunity to take. You would get paid administrative leave, so you're basically paid to go on a vacation. You kept your benefits, you kept your pay at whatever level you were at. Some people, there were exemptions, especially in some of these other agencies, like, you heard about the DODs, the FBIs, and we didn't, that I know of, we didn't have many exemptions, maybe our disaster team, but in OCIO, nobody was exempt from doing that. So the first DRP came around and some people said, ooh, I'm what they call a term position. So eventually my day is going to come. That's not guaranteed. So we had a few people take it. And that was when there was a lot of resistance to, are they going to pay me? Are they not going to pay me? Even, Tim Kaine had this very big speech about, don't do it. It's not guaranteed. We were in a continuing resolution. So this uncertainty for people, it was a big step. But again, I had, I think 7 people in the first round take it out of, at the time, we had our FTE count, our full-time equivalent count was 74. We had several vacancies, but we had 58 filled. So 7 took it. And then we have to absorb the work. We got to figure it out. And then they came around. That's when the RIFs, the reduction of force, started after that, and people got worried. But once you saw the first round of DRPs, they were getting paid. We were making sure that they were getting paid. They were getting their benefits. And I was a strong advocate for ensuring that those things happened. But the leadership changed a lot for CIO. We had an acting CIO who was holding down 2 SES positions for quite some time. And he was doing his best to straddle the fence. In fact, he had an incredible impact on me in my time there. And again, it was more like family. So how do you help your family make these decisions that are so impactful? And one day we got a notice that this was after DOGE had come to the agency and wanted the system access and to start their mission. And we got a political CIO that came in, and our acting CIO, who had been there at that time. This was in February. Had been there 27 years. It was his career. It's what he knew. He said at the time we were called interns. Now we're presidential management fellows. But so he had such a love and passion for the federal government and for SBA. And he did go back up to his original role, but there were so many questions that we all walked away with, as when there is a whole process as how they create the RIF list and how the retention register works. And these are things that I had very little knowledge of. And I'm a policy person. I will read everything. I'll research everything. In fact, I laughed. I was like, I wonder if I could be one of those fact checkers now that, I'm out looking. But I want to, anything anyone says, if I'm not sure, I will research. I say there's one thing, I will not be out researched. So I would research it. I would look for it. I would try to find the answers that were consistent for when I had to. And for me, it was one thing. I had to go home and think about my own life, my decisions, my family, what this looked like for my future, because I planned to stay and retire. Someone who's prior military, I bought my time back, and I truly did love what I did. I worked with, to work with the federal cyber workforce and to understand how to build out early career talent pipelines. And under the last administration, to sit down with the deputy administrator of SBA and talk about, how do we do this? How do we build these early career talent pipelines? How do we bring them in and retain that talent and address skill gaps? How do we do that? And when they came down and said, there were some informal conversations that it just happens, things happen, it gets around. And when they say, this whole team is probably going, not the people, the positions are going to go away. This is the focus. We need to reduce the size of the workforce. And at one point, my whole team, so all the people who handled the budget, the people who handled those acquisitions, one gentleman, incredibly smart, who had actually gone on we call it a detail. He was upstairs working with the acquisitions office, and we had heard, the whole office was going to be RIFed because everything was going to move to GSA. And again, maybe not the worst idea to try and consolidate and collaborate and make sure that the taxpayer dollars were being used the right way, and we were all on the same page. It was like, okay, I can understand some of this, but the approach could have been better. So when I found out that my team was going to be RIFed, there's a whole other ranking system, as a veteran and a disabled veteran. I got more points. I sat at I was a little higher. So it's a whole ranking system that we would do a whole other show on that. But so I wondered if I would stay. The difference is, at the core, I'm not an IT specialist. I don't do programming and networking. I understood in language. I could speak the language, and I can ask the questions of, what do we need? And when AI started emerging, I emerged. I read everything I could. I went to conferences. I talked. I needed to understand what it was we were going to need, the skills that we were going to need, the people we would need to hire to keep up with it. And, there were different companies, the software companies, I'll say, that had a huge interest in it. So the work we were doing, to us, felt so important. And we were working, we had these collaborations, and we had, buy-in from the deputy administrator to sit down with our acting CIO and with a panel of these incredible IT specialists who had built things, who had created unified platforms that were meant to help small business owners. when I was trying to understand it, I likened it to, oh, my chart. Like you have
Yeah.
your go on and you have all your health stuff is in one place, and it's pull it all together so there aren't so many systems. And that was one of the challenges. We had so many systems and they didn't talk to each other. Like let's get some singularity here so that people could have continuity in what they did. And we made it, modernize the technology, make it easier. So when they said that RMO, Resource Management Office, would probably all go, then we had a separate BMO, Business Management Office, which dealt with technology business management and capital planning for IT. When those people were riffed, and we thought, where are they going to move? What's the plan? So I don't know at the end of the day the why behind, were they going to absorb? Were we a shared service? But when you look at the OPM guidance that had always existed before this came along, and I'm not against new innovative ideas that make sense, but they have to make sense. So when you look at these guidance from the Office of Personnel Management and the ways that you could move this talent or move that talent or move this position for continuity and to ensure that we were doing the right things, I wasn't in those meetings. I didn't understand why some people were or weren't kept. And then when the day came, and I knew I was going to be on the RIF list, you had the opportunity to opt into this fork in the road, which eventually became the deferred resignation program. It was a very hard decision because I at first said, they'll have to walk me out of here. I've got, with my buyback in the military, I had 11 years. My severance would be, I think my severance in the DRP, the pay part would be the same, but my medical benefits and now I had to think about my TSP and, how to roll things over. And it was such a heavy decision. But at the end of the day, I just had to have faith that somebody was making the right decision and, that things were going to work out. But the stress and the uncertainty was really taking a toll, not just on me, but on my team, on friends I worked with in other agencies, the coalitions, the partnerships. And I sat down with a friend who had been at a couple different agencies, an incredibly smart woman. She was an enterprise architect, and she said, I'm gonna sign the agreement. I said, I've been thinking about it all weekend. Are you gonna do it? And she said, yep. She said, my husband said, you're marketable. This is hard. Maybe one day you come back. I said, I've had those feelings too. I think I'm going to do it. So that day we both ended up signing, and I thought I would feel this immediate relief. There was a little relief that came with it. And I will say I've worked in private sector. I've seen layoffs. I've seen people lose jobs. So if this was the quote unquote severance, it was a generous severance. And I think that the trial and error is what is just so fast. But this deferred resignation program, I think it is smart. There is a way to approach it because we had COVID. We had a pandemic. We beefed up our workforce and maybe we didn't need all of those positions, but there should have been, if it was my business, I would ensure that there was a calculated way that the work was covered and that people maybe who were closer to that retirement, and it's been done in the past. The workforce has been shrunk in the past for the federal government, but the approach and doing it in such a way that the respect of people who have chosen to be public servants could have been saved. I guess I don't know if saved is the word, but it could have been a bigger part of
the equation.
Yeah.
So now, since leaving, I understand you've started your own business. Anything you'd like to tell us about that?
So it's I always thought my partner and I had talked about, I'll consult, I'll retire, I'll do my 20, maybe 30 years with the government and learn more. There's so much to learn. I still had so much to learn, and I love learning. But HR, that's we go because there's so many different names, and human resources really is. People think about human resources, and before I knew a lot about it, it was okay. We do a lot of administrative work, and you do. There's a lot of administrative work because you have to make sure that everybody's records are right and people are getting paid and they're getting their benefits. Those are important things. That's why they come work for you for those things in exchange. But what I learned, and I'm through the Society of Human Resources Management, I earned my SCP, Senior Certified Professional, which is funny because I studied and studied and studied back in 2021, and I failed the first time, and a lot was going on. We were going through COVID. I really wanted to switch jobs, and I took the test, and I didn't feel great about it, but I failed, and then I walked away, and I thought, well, if I get this certification, it's going to help me. It's going to help me get a better job. And at that time I was trying to build my career through COVID. But it's funny because after I was offered the position with that small business PTG, I hadn't even achieved it. So I left my test date, and my partner, David, he was like, "You're still going to do this, right?" I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to do it. I paid for it. I might as well." So I studied so hard, and I had gotten this incredible position in this offer, and I went in, and I think it was a week before I started the job. I retook the test, and I passed it, and I did really, really well. And I thought, I don't even know if this would have changed my resume, but I'm glad it didn't matter. So studying though through that, I learned so much more about, you hear the words strategic planning, and I think it's something that's tossed around a lot. And even now, being part of groups and people who are in HR, especially, more junior staff, strategic planning feels like this pie in the sky. And it is important to have a strategy. You do need something to work toward. And it just, in the military, I would say, I just come in and I do the same thing every day, but I knew it was expected of me. And I think that's incredibly important for people to go to work and understand what's expected, because I even, as a manager, and when I'm advising people and they say, I've got this person who, they're not doing what they're supposed to. And well, have you had a conversation? Do they know? Well, no, but they shouldn't. No, they don't. If you cannot meet an expectation that you don't know about, and you might think it's understood, but talk to them. Like, I can't tell you how many senior leaders and executives I've talked to, and they're like, they're just not doing that. And I'm like, did you talk to them? Well, should I? Absolutely, you should. And so I think helping people understand strategy is important, but then there are, you think about the strategic, the tactical, the operational, the models I've come up learning. But I remember explaining to someone one day who was getting ready for their SHRM test. They're like, the strategic planning, I'm not getting it. I said, HR aligns to the business objectives. If you don't know what the business wants, just like in my position at SBA, if we don't understand the emerging technologies or what we're working on for the next 3, 5, 10 years, whatever that may be, and it will change, and you should be flexible to change, and you should build a culture of being okay to change. And people say all the time, at least in my line of work, we need to make it safe for people to fail. And it is true, because how do you learn? Sometimes those are the best lessons. But so my company is called Gredere. And when I was trying to think of the name, I wanted it to be meaningful. It's but they call it, the term now is fractional HR, and you've had HR consultants, but really what it is it offers especially small businesses. And in this climate with everything going on, because it's not just affecting those who work for federal government, but the amount, especially here in the DMV, the amount of contractors that we have, and then the layoffs that we saw with contractors. And now we're seeing it even in corporations. I think Walmart just talked about, or I don't know if it happened, or, the laying off 1,500 people. Like, if the jobs aren't there, what are you going to do? You have to create something. And this is one of those sticky areas that you don't want to mess up. So you may not have the money or be ready to bring in a whole HR team or an HR manager or an HR director, whatever it is that you're doing. So reach out to a company, a consultant. So it's called, fractional HR, because then you can choose, what are the pieces I really need right now? And where my strong suit is now strategy, and I want to help. I break it down so it's simple enough. And I did this for a young lady I was working with, and she was like, "Why am I not grasping?" I said, "Okay, I'm in my mid-40s. Do you remember when we would go to restaurants when we were younger, and they'd hand you these, the kids would walk in, you get the crayons and you get the little paper to keep you busy until your food gets there." And I found online this maze. You get the different things, and it was a maze, and there was a turtle was trying to get to the end of the maze. And I said, I was never great at going from the beginning to the end. So I would go to the end where the turtle was. And for whatever reason, I did well working my way backwards to the front. Nobody cared how we got there. But what is it that you're trying to accomplish? The turtle's trying to get to the end. So what do you want to accomplish? And what do you have to do? You have to make the right turns. And if you hit a bump, you change the color of your crayon, you change your strategy, and then you adjust and you move to the accomplishment. And even if your outcome doesn't look exactly like it was when you thought of it, that's okay. And that's another, I had an incredible HR leader that would say that word to me, that phrase, and that's okay. So many people don't get that. So my goal with Gredere is, one, breaking these things down so it doesn't feel so overwhelming, and it's not, people don't feel like, oh my gosh, I can't afford to bring somebody on. Just look at the services. What do you need right now? And if you're not sure, let's have a conversation. And my partner is a incredibly experienced in mentorship, and I had, again, I feel like there's so many, when I say the words, I think of all the people that have impacted me. Reverse mentorship is something that I had not heard the term until I was working with SBA. And I was listening to a panel, and this incredible speaker from GAO, it wasn't a long panel, but when I was working on an initiative with the Human Capital Office at the time, this was, it's just been a little over a year ago, but it was so impactful. And I'll use his first name, Cardell. And I said, Cardell, I reached out. I said, I was so moved by, what you said. And you talked about reverse mentorship, because it's something I've never heard, but it was so easy and it made so much sense. Would you please come to, I'm going to have a town hall to bring all these IT professionals back together. And Deputy Syed is going to be there. So we're going to get a good crowd. And the way he came in and he just talked, he didn't have a script. He didn't have, these points. But he does a lot of speaking. And the GAO is the Government Accountability Office. And it's like that, oh gosh, we got an email from GAO. And but he came in and he just put everybody at ease. And I remember this, because people we're all in the office, but we were down in this, we had it wasn't a conference room. I guess it would be the equivalent to, like, I don't know, we called it the Eisenhower room. So it was this big, they did ceremonies and such down there. But this woman was upstairs and she had joined because we sent it out to the IT workforce and we said, hey, send it on if you want. Like, Cartel is an incredible speaker. So she stood up when he was taking questions. She goes, I was upstairs watching, and I was so moved by your just talk. I had to come down here and I had to see you in person and meet you in person. And I just sat back, and we were having, of all the IT tech pop, we were having these technical difficulties, but she came down and she said, I was just so moved and I needed to be here in the same room with you. And my partner, my business partner, David, is well versed in mentorship and reverse mentorship and coaching. So he is doing that side of it, and I'm doing, there's some just very functional parts of HR you got to have in place. You got to do the I-9 thing,
Yep.
and that can be a little bit scary. But you also have to say, hey, here's our strategy. Here's what we want to do. Here's how we want to hire people. This is what we want people to feel when they come work for us.
And can you spell out the name of the company?
Gredere, Gredere, Gredere. It's
Yep.
Latin. So when we were thinking of the name, I said, David and I were talking, and I said, I want it to mean something, but I just want one word. I want it to be quick. I want people to, and it's an LLC, so it's Gredere LLC. But it means to move forward aggressively. And
Oh, wow. Okay.
that's what I wanted people to understand, that this is progress. No matter how much, it's still progress. If you're talking to us, it's progress. If you're taking one of the 5 things that we share with you and you're saying, okay, I want to implement this now, I don't know if I'm ready for those, it's progress. The progress that you feel will keep you moving. How can we help you do that? And
Awesome.
I have expertise that I want to share, and I want, especially the younger generation, that as they're looking around and saying, and I encourage my boys, Ben and Alex, and my partner's children, Ryan is interested in HVAC, and I said, you can own your own company, do this, but work for yourself. It's like renting and buying. Work for you.
Yes.
Go work for other places if it moves you, but work for you. So talk to people who can help you understand how to solidify your business the right way. But no matter what technology comes along, AI, some people are afraid of it. I think it's going to be beautifully aligned if we can get there. You will need people. So let's learn your people, align your people to your vision. And when the hard days come, learn how to deal with those too. But bring in people who can give you that objective, aligning overview and help you align those things to your business. So you're not distracted and you're not always dealing with the employee relations issues, which it's actually one of my favorite things. It's one of my favorite things about HR, because I feel like we may not get exactly what you want and we may not get exactly what I want, but somewhere we're going to find a solution here that will work for us. And that is so much about, people come in with this, when they get to that point of employee relations, or when you're worried, if your business is struggling, you're desperate and you don't want to just make a decision that could take you down the wrong path. So let a business like Gredere come in and help guide you. And like I said, if you're a big business and you're like, you know what, we need somebody to come in and we need to sit down, we need a week strategy session, we need you to sit with the executives, we need you to pick apart what's going on, we're there to do that. We want to talk about, we've got problems who, we need to mentor. We want to retain this talent because we have so much turnover, which is incredibly expensive. Okay, let's help you learn how to retain that talent and build your succession plan, because that is what will keep your business going without the complete loss. And now you're not hitting milestones or you're losing money.
And that, like you were saying with the HVAC and whatever,
Yeah.
that element of the economy is really growing, and
Right.
and so much so that the school divisions are sort of acknowledging that that's an avenue that needs to be pursued, where in the past it was everybody's going to go to college, which is,
Yes.
but then we sort of ignored, I'll say, that other element, which is really vital. I mean, there's, we're in Virginia, and there's so many things that can go wrong with our equipment and whatnot. But by not focusing on that element, and those companies that doing that may not need to have a whole full-fledged HR component, but they need something else. So that it's really a need that's out there to meet different elements to it. Do you have any advice to anybody else that's facing what you've had to face?
I will talk to, and this is the point where I'm going to say I go to my notes, and the first thing I did when David and we filed for the LLC, we got our entity number, we got our cage code, because we hope that contracting revives. We want to make sure the right contracts are happening for any local, state, federal government. And I will say it's getting you have to go through the paperwork. And I'll credit David, because he did he did a lot of that. He was like, I will do the business development. You write the content. We eventually want to build our podcasts and have those things. But right now it's like, we just got to get the business established. But it's truly somebody, if you are in the position that I've been in, if you consider the deferred resignation program. And I spoke to an incredible, and I feel like I'm talking, these people are incredible, because there truly are so many incredible people in the federal government that we're wondering, where do we go from here? Our plan was we're going to be here for 20, 30 years, and that's been interrupted. And what do you do? And she was at USDA, and she was kind of the me at USDA, and they had this amazing workforce development program. Their strategic plan was beautiful, and we recently connected, and we're like, we were supposed to meet so many times. How did this not happen? And she said, I just couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't take the stress. I couldn't continue. And all the work I've ever seen, and I've talked to people who've talked with her, and they're like, oh, you have to get in touch with her. I'm like, I'm trying. Our schedules never match up. She said, I couldn't do it. I stepped away. But I know you started your LLC, and I want to talk to you about that. And I said, I was like, I'm so happy to talk to you, but let's talk as people first. And what I did, and I had some other friends. I had someone who recently left DHS. I have my best friend is in FBI, so it's been a very interesting road for her. She is still there. And like I said, just these incredibly smart people, especially these incredibly smart women in tech. She's hanging in there, but some of us have just accepted what it is. We're going to be RIFed, so we can either take the DRP or we can get RIFed. Some people can go with more severance. Some people can get up to a year of severance, depending on how long they've been there, which is, it's hard. Like I have one of the ladies that worked for me, who's also, like I said, you develop these friendships, and it's such more like a family environment. She's been in the federal government for 18 years, and she truly did say, they will have to push me out. They will have to walk me out of here. And just based on the calculations, everything, she would have had 52 weeks of severance. The difference is, if you take it and then you come back, 52 weeks is what you get in a lifetime. So if it ever happened again, if you got riffed again, you don't, that takes away from that. So what I told this friend who left USDA, and I said, when did you, my last effective working day at SBA was April 18th. And everybody handles it differently, but it was a Friday, so it's supposed to be casual Friday. But I went through all, you wear jeans, and I always wear a blazer or such. It's what I do. And I was like, jeans just don't feel right today. But I insisted on, so I dressed for success. I put on my suit. I took my bags just like I do. I packed my lunch. I took the train. I did not drive up. I had already taken all my stuff out of my office. I took the train, and I insisted on giving myself the regular routine that I had because I didn't know that this would be the end for me with the government, and I didn't want to do anything that felt out of routine for me, even though the whole day was out of routine and emotionally it was difficult. But everybody has to deal with it in their own way. If you need to drive up in your car because you're going to be emotional the whole way home, you do that. But I took the train there, and I finished up my work. I cleaned out. I wiped down my office. I did all the things, and I will miss my office. It was a beautiful office. But it was, and then when it was time to go, I switched into my comfortable shoes and I walked to the train. And so my first week out, I said, I'm going to take 2 weeks. I'm not going to watch the news. I'm not going to worry about work. I'm not going to apply to any jobs. I'm going to decompress. And another friend of mine, Kathleen, who was, she left DHS and she did the same thing. And I think it helps you a little bit, mentally just kind of decompress. And when you give yourself that time, like, I'm going to take this 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever you need to take, for me, it was 2 weeks. And then I said, well, maybe I need a little longer, but give yourself that time and however you call it, the grace and space to decompress. Because my mind was so wrapped around, at that point, I was so heavily involved in the policies and reviewing the right and the wrong of what was happening and watching the news and the things that were coming out. I had a Twitter account many years ago. I didn't keep up with it. And then I deleted it. I didn't want anything coming up on my phone. I didn't want to look at it, but again, it was very hard to change my social media algorithm. So I stayed off my phone. I wrote. In fact, I called it word vomit, and I was like, let me bring these notes with me in case there's anything in here, and I'll leave them with you so that you can have just this thought of, and it's so many things. I wrote so many different things, but you have to do what helps you cope. And my grandmother always said, Tam, you need to write. And it didn't hit me until I was pregnant with Ben. I was 25. And I started writing regularly, and you get in and out of it. But it has helped me remember things that I just didn't remember because your mind was so full of certain things. But you have to take that time to decompress because you really are grieving. It's a breakup.
Yeah.
And this, and I was texting with one of my, now I will call him a good friend. In fact, two of them. And I said, put me in the mindset. I was like, I know I have to be kind of careful with what I say. And, we want to focus on the people and what's happening, the impact of the people, especially, we have so many federal government workers in Stafford County who do the commute that I'd hop on the train with every day. And the overall feeling, you would hear the laughing and the joking and the people who knew each other for years just from riding the train, and then the shift in what you heard and the tension, the lack of laughter on the way home, especially on Fridays. We all had to do return to office, which I was fine with. I was actually, when I got there, one of the things I did was I worked with another incredibly talented person, Raheem, who helped me. Raheem and Brian, we had to build a hoteling system, and I had to figure out a way to do this in my first few weeks. Negotiated with the union, and it was just baptism by fire. But I learned so much, and again, the trust that I earned from these people. So we built out this reservation system within MS Teams, and I won't say all it cost us because it cost you the labor with the people that are there, but we didn't have to buy any new systems. We figured out how to do this very chaotic thing in a short amount of time. We negotiated with the union, and this was such an incredible accomplishment. And I broke it down in simple terms, and that is always my goal in HR and IT. And any project I work with, I want to make it simple. So simplify how you're going to do your transition, do what you need to do, get in the headspace, and hopefully you get there to a point that you are ready to move on. Again, this is the severance, or whatever you want to call it. We're getting paid through the end of September, and the time is flying. I will say, since April 18th, I'm like, however, I got a kid graduating, and we're trying to figure out things. So maybe feeling a little faster for me. The first week I was out, I've been trying to lay hardwood floors upstairs, taking the carpet out, and we were down to the last room, and my partner was away, and I said, that's it. I moved the bed. I had the kids help me, and I finished the room, and I laid all hardwood floors in my room. I ripped up carpet. I did almost everything myself. I just had to have the kids help me move stuff, but that was a project that had been put off for how long, and so I did those things. I've spent more money at Lowe's in the last couple of months than I'm sure I should have. I was connected with people who, I didn't know, but people said, "Oh, I think you should connect with this person." And you have to. I stayed in touch with. There were people I work with at SBA who just refused to accept that this is it. One really good friend of mine who I met said, she keeps sending me these memes about when your coworkers this, I was like, I said, I laugh so much, Kayla, when you send me these memes, and you will continue to refer to me as your coworker. She said, I will never not send you a meme that doesn't refer to you as my coworker, because I have not accepted it. But I stayed in touch with people, and even I have this one, and I had to message him this morning and say, hey, I'm going to do this, and I just wanted to make sure it's okay with you, because I won't say names, but I'm going to talk about my own impacts. But if I brought up your story, anybody who listened might know who I'm talking about. Is it okay? And he said, that's exciting. I'd be honored. Of course, it's okay. Makes my day. Good luck with it. And he said, you made an impact on me and lifted the entire culture of OCIO. Never forget it. We have to cling to these things and accept that we're going to have some bad days. But he said, reflect on the notes you received when you're bummed. And there were people who reached out and said a lot of things. And I did. I captured those notes, and I took screenshots, and I told everybody who was struggling, I said, take those notes, forward them to yourself, read those when you have the hard days, and let that lift you up when you need it. And there's going to be days that nothing's going to lift you up, And like I said, this incredible leader who gave so much of his time and his life, truly. He has 2 teenagers. One just finished his first year at UVA. The other is going to be a junior. She's a year ahead of Alex, so she's going to be a junior this year. But he's so dedicated, and he's so involved. And I will say, he listened to me, and we had some very spirited conversations. And this man is an SES who's been there for a long time. But he accepted his own faults, and he accepted where I had these good ideas. He never shut me down. And there were some leaders that did. They just, especially as this administration changed, there were some people they come in, they're told there's a mission, they're going to do it. And they had preconceived notions coming in. And this gentleman, I'll call him, is such an incredible leader. And he recently took the DRP. He struggled. We had many, many conversations about it because, again, I go through policy. I was an executive advisor. And I said, there's so much more out there and that you can do. He said, I know. I just have to get there. He said, if I could do it all over again, I would have been a high school principal and a basketball coach. And I said, so when I saw that Principal Daniels was leaving, I said, hey, here's your chance. He was like, maybe one day. But there were the other leader, Calvin Moore, just incredible people that I met. And he was the chief information security officer. And he moved on after he retired, and he's gotten some contracts. And he is just this force that, he's doing some work with not just us, but with other countries and commercial and the connections he's made. And he keeps me going too. And I was like, put me in the mindset. He was like, you're doing what you're meant to do. And you need to find those people. You need to remember those people and continue to reach out, on the bad days, on the good days, and just say, because some people have no idea what they're going to do next. Mm-hmm. I'm continuing to apply to jobs, and because a business will take time to get off and running, and a lot of startups aren't successful. And it's hard when the rejection letters come in, but you've gotten them before. So remember why you were in the position you were in. And this was not a normal path, or it wasn't a normal process. It's been unprecedented. We've said that on many levels. And I do hope to see a lot of positive things come from it, because I think that if I can say anything about the deferred resignation program, it may not be popular opinion, but I think it's a really good program, and nobody else was aggressive enough to come up with something like that. Think about the approach, tweak the approach. But when you have to beef up for something like a pandemic like this, like we've never had to do, you probably are. There are opportunities to decrease the workforce or to shift the work to other places. And that happens in private sector. They have layoffs all the time. So this was done in such a way that I think was a little haphazard, could have gone a little better. But ultimately, my last effective day was April 18th. I still have a paycheck coming in. There are people who are still there, who are working very hard to make sure that that's happening. They have to sign it every week. And they're continuing to get new leadership, and they're conforming. But, every payday I check and it's there, and I make my appointments for my doctors, and nothing's been denied. I walk in, I get what I need. I'm navigating the next parts. I'm hoping to network and really launch Gredere. And, but I'm not jaded in that I think it's just going to be this thing that's going to happen in 6 months. And if it does, great. But it's an opportunity. It's there. I think I know people. And my goal, if I was to be anything in the HR world, if there was still the chief people officer, a culture officer, because I was a manager before I moved into an HR business partner role. And I was like, man, people they're always mad at you. You have to deliver the bad news. Sometimes it's the great news, but in fact, going through Airman Leadership School in the Air Force, you would have to write a performance review. And they're like, the good ones are easy, but here are the bad ones. Let's write the bad ones. And they are. It's hard. Nobody wants to deliver the bad news, but a very strong and skilled leader can do that. And if you're not, you're doing those people a disservice, because they'll never understand what they're not doing right. And they're going to continue to move on and not do it right. And you had the opportunity to help them improve. So do those things. And like I said, cling to the things that you know you're good at. Send those letters and those texts and whatever. Keep them in a folder. And on your hard days, go back and read them. And remember your purpose, or define your purpose if you didn't know it yet. And for me, it's helping people understand the crux of HR. You don't have to, don't keep yourself up at night worrying that you have to hire an HR director with a 6-figure salary. There are businesses and there are opportunities out there like Gredere that can offer you solutions for the time, whatever that looks like for you. And if you don't know, you can do, a free 30-minute, 60-minute consultation, and we'll help you figure it out, because I want to build relationships and I want it to be a good experience for you. And then you're going to tell somebody else what a good experience it was. And it's not just HR. There are fractional CFOs. Our CFO at SBA, when she left, she started doing fractional CFO work. You're going to see fractional CIOs come out, especially with startups, to help them be successful, to help them with those things that they don't understand. They may have an amazing idea, but you don't want it to fail because you didn't do this one thing, or you didn't align your HR strategy and your hiring and your retention, to the business. And, let us help you do that.
Well, I think you've been very helpful for all of us to understand the last basically 6 months of what we've been going through. And I appreciate you coming in and giving us all your knowledge and your great leadership ability. And so I want to thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you. Thank you again, Tamara, for sharing your time with us. I'm certain your willingness to share your experiences with us has given us all a better understanding of how political decisions impact individuals. And I certainly wish you good luck in all your business adventures. As I mentioned at the start of the program, the effort to reduce the size of the federal government has been around for over 50 years. There are competing viewpoints. Recently on C-SPAN, there was a panel of authors who advocated even more agencies and more federal workers. There were other authors who point to the advances in technology as ways for us to reduce the cost and the size of our operating programs. It has been said that those on the left view many and every agency as vital as Social Security, while those on the right view agencies as similar to the Department of Motor Vehicles. It is important to remember that these are people with families that are in these agencies, some of whom are our very neighbors. With that, I want to thank you for joining us on our episode. We do appreciate you and hope you will refer us to your friends. And again, while we're on the subject of friends and we're going into summer, we want to thank our friends at Tilly's Ice Cream for their kind support of this program. Tilly's is located at the Ferry Farm Shopping Center at 215 Kings Highway. Next time you're in the area, stop by and treat yourself. You're going to be glad you did. And on our next episode, we'll be discussing Stafford County's Water Rescue Team, part of the Fire and Rescue Department. They not only address situations that arise on our waters and our rivers, but also they went and assisted in the relief after last year's hurricane. Until then, I'm Tom Cohen, and you're listening to the Stafford Connect podcast. Stafford Connect is a River's Edge Media original podcast. You can listen to the show anywhere you get your podcast, or you can catch us on the video on the YouTube channel. Stafford Connect, the conversation begins here.